Hey everybody, welcome to Black Lotus Live, where we talk about all things strange and unusual. And tonight we have author Natalie Zett with us, and she's written a book about the Eastland Disaster of 1915. Let me give you a bit of a background about her. She's a writer, an actor, photographer, and musician, and has worked as a freelance journalist for magazines and papers since her late teens. Her favorite writing job was working for an award-winning community newspaper in St. Paul, which is called the Park Bugle. Natalie also taught others how to write for community newspapers at the Loft Literary Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And during the last few years, she became a family historian. Natalie is a proud graduate of Ursuline College, Pepper Pike, Ohio, where she majored in business administration. She also graduated from Luther Seminary in St. Paul, Minnesota, where she received an MA in systematic theology. Natalie is drawn to misplaced and forgotten stories because they're more compelling than the world would let us believe. As I said, she's written a book, and it's called Flower in the River, which is about the Eastland Disaster of 1915, and it led her down a path into the paranormal. I have dropped a link to that book and her website in the description, so be sure to check that out. Natalie, it's wonderful to have you with us tonight. Thank you for Black Lotus.
Well, thank you for the most amazing introduction. I really love that. I mean, just the pre-introduction, I should say, and the introduction. Thank you so much. Great to be here. I was like, whoa, that's cool. So,
when do you? I'm just kidding. No.
All the time on the job. No, just kidding.
So I have to admit, I didn't know anything about the Eastland disaster.
Yeah, that's typical.
And and I think that that's typical of a lot of people. You know, the Titanic got all kinds of press, but this thing really doesn't. Can you tell us what happened and what that's about?
So, do people generally know what Western Electric was at one point, do you think? Or should I do okay, so Western Electric was kind of, I suppose, the equivalent of the Silicon Valley at some point, especially at the turn of the 20th century. And they were based out of Chicago. I mean, the big facility was based out of Chicago. At one point, they had like 45,000 people. They were like a city within a city. That's how big the factory was. And they were in Cicero. And it was called the Hawthorne Works, if you've ever heard of that. The time motion studies, the Hawthorne effect. That's what was going on there. And a lot of people in Chicago, working class immigrants. I am the proud granddaughter of 4 immigrants from Eastern Europe, Central Europe. And so a lot of the people came there, immigrated there for work. And so every year, Western Electric would chart boats for this company, picnic across Lake Michigan. If you know Chicago, go across Lake Michigan to Michigan City, Indiana, to the dunes, and have a picnic and baseball games and all kinds of stuff. Fun time was planned for all. But on that day, they had 5 ships. The first one was the Eastland, And the Eastland was kind of a cranky vessel, as she was called, and she was top heavy already. And she was repaired with concrete on top, because what could go wrong there? And because of the Titanic in 1912, which was 3 years before, they overloaded her on top with lifeboats. So when about 2,500 people stormed on this thing to be the first ones, and it was exciting and everything, it started to list, went back and forth and back and forth. And I guess within minutes, the thing just turned over. Somebody who was there, who I met, she was a little girl when it happened. She said it was like an egg just rolling over. Mm-hmm. And 844 people were killed, and it was a spectacle too. So everybody that was surrounding this area is downtown Chicago. It's a really small area between Clark and LaSalle. They were just like, huh? I mean, and then there was a photographer there who was going to do some photo ops for the company Picnic for Western Electric. And he ended up being basically the documenteer of this whole thing. It just was photographing everything. So the thing was over on its side. People are falling all over. I can't imagine falling in and out of the water, crushed beneath the thing, because many of them ran below because it was raining. Most of the dead were, again, I hear my theory as to why the thing is forgotten, and I could be wrong, okay, but they weren't wealthy. They weren't well known. They were working. They call it the working class Titanic. And of those of us of the working class, there's a way where we're perceived differently. And that could be one. I mean, that's a simple, explanation. But a lot of it, too, I think it was one of the survivors said it was so painful for the families that they wanted to forget. 1915, this happened. So no psychological help for people. In my family, one of the 844 was my 19-year-old great aunt. And she didn't work for Western Electric. My grandmother was pregnant. She should have been on that thing. She gave her tickets, and I call it in the book one-way ticket. And so she was crushed, and the bodies, they didn't know what to do with 844 bodies in downtown Chicago, no air conditioning, 1915 in July. So they hauled them to this 2nd Regiment Armory and laid them out. I guess they were like 85 in a row for people to identify. And that is the site, the armory is the site of Harpo Studios, which was the home of the Oprah Winfrey Show for many years. So there's a lot of funny little things that happen in this story. But my grandmother went down to identify her sister's body. And it just, as one of my relatives said, it blew the family up. Her mother had a breakdown, and she'd go every day to the trolley to wait for Martha, who was killed, to come back home. But most of the people who were killed were very young. The majority, I think, were from Czechoslovakia or probably children. Maybe, yeah. And most of them are buried in the Bohemian National Cemetery in Chicago. My aunt is buried in Bethania, which is next to Resurrection Cemetery. If you've heard of Resurrection Mary, Chicago's most famous, you know everything, Victoria. Hitchhiking Ghost. Yeah, I know. Never mind. So anyway, right next door is Resurrection Cemetery. So there's a lot of things that happened on that day. And so that was my family legacy, which I didn't find out about until well into adulthood. So that was part of my writing this book, was just the sheer shock of it. Like, whoa, what a thing to find out when you think you know everything about your family.
Right.
Wow. How awful. And, I can see why the Titanic got all that press and this one didn't, because, the Titanic was filled with rich people.
Yeah.
So,
well, there's a part of history that's doing the same thing. Well, maybe it was last year. 2020 has been going on for the last few years. So whenever in 2020 it happened, they were like tearing down statues here, if anything with Confederate. And so they're trying to forget part of history that they don't like. Do you think that's part of it too? I mean, it's like you were saying, it was the not rich people.
I think that there's a way. I mean, I was going to say, even growing up, I mean, even though we were of those ethnic groups, I mean, face it, when we look for images of ourselves in films or whatever, it's like the villagers in the Frankenstein movie, Count Dracula. I mean, those are not people, and it's just like, you want to be cool when you're a teenager. So there's a way where we distance ourselves from that, and I also think, yes, the sheer trauma, and I didn't really think about how trauma visited from my grandmother to my mother to me and my sister, because we didn't know about it. But yet, as my dad used to always say, it's in the blood. So I think there's a lot of it where I don't think we want to deal with that kind of trauma. We didn't have the ability to deal with that trauma, and face it, back then, their way of dealing with it was just, you just get through, crack up later, when you have the time. But people, I don't know that it was really a conspiratorial type of thing, but I just think it was just one of those things that happened. Other things also, World War I started not too long after that. So that's one of the theories too, that just how the news cycle, it's like, Ukraine, our friends are there, and it's like, well, that's kind of getting lost. It's just like, huh? But this is how we are. We can only sustain attention for a short amount of time. And if entire families are wiped out, if it was you and me living in the same neighborhood and your mom and dad and my mom and dad, and it's just like, do we want to really talk to each other about that? Not back then.
Yeah.
I think the whole attention span thing is even worse today because of the bombardment of news feed that we're getting.
Yeah.
So something big could happen and everybody's outraged because of it. And then, 3 days later,
Yeah, we're all suffering from a lot of that too. And it's just the way that media bombards us. But even back then, you guys, I was looking at I should say y'all, okay, because most of the Texas thing, but the newspapers, the newspapers, they would have, I understand. So anyway, I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania, so we kind of border that. But I think that even the newspapers, they were really quick getting the information out. And I was kind of surprised at that. How did they get it that quickly? Probably through the devices, created by Western Electric, telegraphs, whatever. I mean, so it did get out fairly quickly. A lot of it was wrong, like 2,000 people died, stuff like that. It was incorrect, but they got it out there, and then they started, the blame game right away. Whose fault is this? Well, is it anybody's real fault? Yeah. So, and then they wanted somebody. We always want somebody to blame for the horror, even when it just stuff happens.
Well, I mean, it was just a big mistake. Putting the concrete on top and all those extra lifeboats, and what did they think was going to happen?
I don't know. I mean, even I, who did not do well in physics, knew that when I saw that the ship, like a reenactment of it, it's like, whoa, that's a V, that doesn't work. But I think too, the other thing too that did happen, that they did hold the captain responsible for, is that they basically dealt with were just like relieving the ballast of all the stuff that it had, because they wanted to lift up the ship so people could enter quicker. And what that did is it even made it worse. So it's just like, if it could go wrong, it did go wrong. What is that, Peter's principle or whatever? Everything that could have gone wrong went wrong in that situation. And yet, I think it was the forgetting of it. And yet it was not acknowledging the fact that how it affected people, even to my generation, and having met others whose families, they were considerably older than I was at that point. They remember their parents talking about it. They remember people descending into drug addiction or alcoholism. One woman said to me, she said, my brother died of the Eastland, even though he survived it, because he just couldn't cope. And so compassion, and then wanting to tell the story to keep it alive. At least when I wrote the book, y'all, okay, what I did was I just wanted to do it for me and for the sake of my mother's sister, who was a reporter in Chicago. She didn't know. She said, I'm older. I'm going to pass away. Would you please do something with this? And I thought, okay. I don't want to write a book, but I wrote a book. And that's how it came into being, into the world.
So I imagine one of the reasons that you did write this book is because of your ancestor who died. Tell us about what happened when you started researching your genealogy.
Oh, you want to get to the good stuff, do you? Okay, Damien, we'll do it. What happened was this. And even though I grew up around family members on my father's side, this event happened on my mother's side, who were Roma, telling fortunes, talking to the dead. I thought every family did this sort of thing until I got out into playing with other kids. And it's like, okay, people don't read tarot cards at home. Okay, so we do. So I grew up with it. It was familiar to me, but it was also one of those things, like the big ones. Big.
Right here.
Well, afterwards we could just stay and you could tell me my fortune. I can't give myself. But so I learned to kind of keep my life compartmentalized. But when I I distanced myself from that growing up because I wanted to be sophisticated. I wanted to be erudite, all these things. You know how it is when you're a kid. And so I put those childish things to one side. And then when I began researching this, I researched it the same way that I would research any article. And at this point, it was like 1998, 99. The internet was not the thing that it became. And I couldn't really find anything because, as you pointed out, it's still not well known. So I just thought, and I just kept driving to places where I was finding family history, things. And I thought maybe I can just talk to people. Maybe I can go to a local library because things were not that connected. And it was grooving along like every other research project that I had done until I decided to go to the cemetery in Chicago to see the grave. So that's about 7-hour drive from here. And I decided to break up the drive. And when I was in this little hotel in Wisconsin, things started happening in the hotel room. And it was one of those things where there were noises of undetermined origin and just a feeling that somebody else was in there with me. And I thought, oh, you got to be kidding me. And I really didn't welcome it. I was not one of those people that let's just go out and see if this house is haunted. It's like, are you kidding me? I grew up with those people. And I think I learned a fair amount of respect. So it wasn't so much distancing, but it was just like, if you're going to play with this, there's going to be things will come back at you. There's a little bit of a whiplash effect. So just be aware. So I thought, oh no, I don't want anybody to pass by. I didn't want any kind of experiences. Then when I woke up the next day to drive to the cemetery in Chicago, I thought, well, that didn't happen. Then I got to the cemetery in Chicago, and it's a big cemetery with lots of graves. And I thought, Natalie, you didn't think this one out real well because how am I going to find them? It was Labor Day weekend, so everything was closed. I thought, crap, what did you do now? And I thought, I'll never find them. But I thought, no, I will find them. And what happened was I was combing, like I called a human crop duster, going up and down all these graves. And then I tripped. I didn't fall, but I tripped, and it kind of pushed me in a different direction. And then I turned and I looked at my car, and I didn't see the headstone when I first was there. And I parked right in front of it, and I didn't see it. So I thought, this is not unusual, though. I thought it was really unique because I didn't want to talk with anybody about this at first. But there was a fellow who did a book on, he's actually a very renowned genealogist, but he also did 2 books on psychic experiences in genealogy where people don't want to talk about this stuff. But it's just like finding graves. It's like, yeah, everybody does that. It's like, I didn't know. So that was the first one. And it sounds kind of benign, and it was, but it escalated. So when I went back to my apartment in St. Paul to finish my article for the newspaper that I said I would have it done, stuff started. St. Paul's not on an earthquake line, by the way. Stuff started flying off my refrigerator, not when I was in there, but when I was in the other room typing my little article. And I thought, after the third time, I thought, oh, God. And I didn't know what to do. And I wasn't thrilled about this. And I thought, okay, don't go walking by. I want to help you, but you're going to have to show me what to do, but please stop knocking stuff off my refrigerator, And I thought, who am I going to tell, really? Who's going to believe that? And I only had really one friend that was into new agey stuff, and she was much more so into it than I was. And she said, oh, I believe you. And I thought, oh, boy. So that's how it started. And then I was always feeling like somebody touching the back of my hand or my arms. And again, it was a fair amount of, what do I do? I'm cornered. There's nothing I can really do but say, what do you want? And how can I honor you? And also the feeling was 2 years before this happened, my father had died. And I think that's why I was open to the experience. So my aunt sent this family history, the reporter. Otherwise, I think I would have thrown it in a drawer and just, that's nice. Thank you very much. But I thought I was looking for something, not stuff flying off my refrigerator, but I was looking for connection because I had just lost a significant person in my life who I thought would always be there. And losing that first parent is always so, so painful. And I think my heart and my mind and everything else, my bones, whatever, they were so open to this stuff that I think something could finally get in and start the connection process. It's like, okay, we heard you. Here we are. And it's like, oh, it was that type of thing. So yeah, that's when it started, and it continued for it's still going on, but I guess either I'm used to it or it's not as dramatic as it once was. But those first types of things that happen, somebody said you're just one experience away from becoming a believer. So that's kind of what happened. I thought, this stuff is real. How about that? I didn't make it up. Yeah.
It's a big eye-opener.
You mentioned that somebody told you this is pretty common for people that study genealogy.
It's a hard word, yes, I understand, yes.
And I've mentioned before on the show that when Ralph and I first started doing Black Lotus, we were jumping down a lot of rabbit holes and studying the paranormal and all that kind of stuff. And shortly after, we ended up with a shadow person in our house.
Okay.
And you're lucky that you only had things like things getting knocked off your refrigerator. This thing that showed up, he would be in the hallway and you'd only see it for a split second, but when it left, you'd have this really awful feeling.
Okay.
And so I think that does happen. I think when you study the paranormal, you attract these things.
I don't even know if it's attracting. I think it might be opening your eyes.
Oh, well, maybe that's
stuff is already happening. It's just now you're opening your eyes to it.
Yeah,
you're right. I think you're both right, actually. I think there's something to that because I think growing up in the family that I did, there was, like I said, a respect for it. So it's not like you just kind of go willy-nilly into this stuff, though some people do. I guess I'm just really cautious. But there was a respect that something could happen. And as one of my relatives said, once you open yourself up, you must be careful. Like any living relative, there's some of the people I'm related to who are alive. I wouldn't want to be in the same room with them. And it's the same with these people. Seriously, it's like,
I know.
It's like you have Baltimore. So yeah, exactly. So it's the same with this. But what you're saying too, Ralph, is that I was broken open. So I was willing to see what I was not willing to see at first, and I was also willing to remember, to go back to my childhood and think of the things that happened, because a lot more crazy stuff happened when I was a kid. But then I was told that didn't happen. And it was nothing nefarious. It was just some of the paranormal stuff. I thought it did happen because I saw my aunt when I was probably like 7 or 8 in my parents' living room. And I remembered her again when I saw the photo with the newspaper clipping decades later. And so it brought everything together. It brought everything together. But it was a wild ride. But no shadow people so far, except for her and a few other stragglers.
They're coming.
Don't. They're not bad, The whole house is filled with them. Believe me, I know.
Yeah, it's all about your perception. If you're going to go into this like, jump scared, then of course everything's going to scare the crap out of you. But I'm like you. The first one I saw, I was like 2.5, and then I saw my grandpa when he was. I don't know how old he was. I was 7. I saw him when he died. I'm like, hey, and he goes, go back to bed. I'm like, okay. So Grandpa said, go to bed, so I'm going to bed.
Yeah, exactly.
If you're not afraid of it. No.
Wild, do you have any questions?
He froze.
It looks like he just froze.
Yeah, he froze. Well, we scared him. Oh, sorry, Wild. Sorry. This happens though a lot with me and people. You just start that family history and boom, out you go. But it is
synchronicity. I'm sorry, a synchronicity to your life.
No, go ahead. You're right.
Once it's like a film sprocket. Once you start, you're like, okay, now I'm going to go. It's like going through. Do you remember the card catalog?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's how I first started researching. Yeah, I think it is right. And again, it's like, as Carl Jung said, you start to pay attention. Ralph said the same thing. It's just you start to see things, and sometimes too it can be confirmation bias. I'm always, again, as a journalist, and so I step back and it's like, okay, is this really happening? Yeah, it's really happening. And after one of my cousins said after the 500th coincidence, maybe it's more than that. And I think that that's the case. And as I've been open to it, it comes easier to me. So it's one of those things, and I can evaluate it and just say, okay, what is this? What do you need? And I've been able to but grow, let's just say grow, and connect to other dead family members and help living connect to their dead and all that. And it's like, yeah, that's, my sister said, well, you've taken up the family business after all. And I said, yeah, I guess so. So it's just one of those things where I think the biggest joy, it's not just for entertainment. It was really, I think it was a matter of life and death. It was a matter of connecting things. It was a matter of, before my mother died in January, I was able to give her history back, because her own mother died, her mother who identified her sister, when my mom was 3. So she never knew. There's no reason I should have known this story. That's what's so astonishing about it. But it was so nice to give my mother back her history and to give other people back their history, because it is important. And even if these, some of these people you find is like, oh gosh, but they're still part of our tapestry. And for better or for ill, they make us who we are, and we can make choices as to who we want to be, but we can also draw so much strength from them. It's like, how did these people get by? And thinking of 2020, Victoria, so like, oh my gosh. And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I know people that I'm related to that did much better in worse situations. No Netflix back, in 1918. And so that type of thing.
I guess there wasn't. I don't even have a TV, so I don't know.
Oh my! Oh no! Oh, I must. So anyway, yeah, but yeah, all the synchronicities for sure. So Trees is back. Hi.
Hey, Wild Trees, your mic is muted.
I don't think he can hear us.
I don't think he can.
I'm not sure he can either. We're looking at you though. Hi.
This is why we break out an interpretive dance.
Exactly.
Don't tempt him.
There you go. So yeah, it is one of those types of things, and I'm grateful that you're interested in it, because I think anytime someone is interested, and when I wrote the book, I just thought, no one's going to really look at this, but I've been surprised. But I think that it's resonating with some people.
I was just trying to.
Are we still cutting out?
I was trying to.
Yeah, you're cutting out a lot, buddy.
Hey, you're cutting out. Sorry. Yeah. We need artificial intelligence to do the closed captioning, very closed captioning. So, so back with the book, it's one of those things where I thought, well, I'll be interested, and a few relatives will be interested, but it's going all, like Martha, who died at 19, who's the woman who was killed. She's gone all over the globe now in a way that I think she would have never imagined. And I also thought too, am I a continuation of her? And I thought, yeah, I probably am. We seem to have enough in common. And I'm getting to live the life that at 19, she never could. She could only dream of. So in a sense, it's like a promise fulfilled. And I think there's that sense too, that I had prior to this. I'm just myself, the captain of my ship, not really connected to anyone. It's nurture, not nature, and all this other family stuff. I thought, no, there's a respect obligation, but also what would there's a prayer in the Jewish prayer book. What would they in their higher selves have done? And it is our obligation as being the living ones to continue carrying that out. So in her highest moments, I hope she would have done some of this stuff. And I hope that she would have seen that your life mattered. It wasn't just cut off. It's continuing. So that's what I've learned.
It seems to me that the way you approach the genealogy is out of love and respect. And I think that that's why you've had probably more pleasant experiences than other people have with spirits. And I appreciate that, because again, you see all these paranormal shows on TV where they're ghost hunting and they're calling out the spirits and making unreasonable demands on them. And,
it's like, yeah, I cringe. I think, boy, you're going to get it. I just think it's better times, like TikTok. Yeah.
Does the book that you've written get into your paranormal experiences with it?
Yeah, it does. Well, here's the funny thing.
Okay.
Funny thing is that it does, but I did not want to make it the focus of that. I wrote it as historical fiction, and then I thought genealogy, because I published independently because also I was not going to try to make it a marketing thing to make it sellable. I thought, I don't care if anybody buys it. I had to be true to the story. So I put it in those two categories. When you independently publish, you have to make the choices. And the Amazon bots, God bless them, they are the ones that decided to put it under occult fiction. I did not do that. And it was like, again, I was still in a sense uncomfortable with that. I thought, oh my. So that's why it's almost like the fates conspired to put me in this category, whether I want it or not. And it will always be an uneasy thing.
Sorry about earlier. I just have my... Oh,
that's okay. He's still back kind of slowly, but that's what happened. So I didn't intend to write an occult book, but I did. So that's what happened.
Yeah, sorry. I just had a lag in my mute button.
Yeah.
Did you mute it right now?
No. Do you have any questions, Wild?
Well, you can talk, yeah. Still slowing
Now he's
down.
muted.
Yeah, you're muted again.
You're muted again. Okay. Anyway.
There you go.
Can you guys hear me?
So,
Yes.
do you have any questions? Wow.
It's unusual for Wild to be having this much difficulty.
Really? It happens. So technology is beautiful until this happens. But yeah.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Now.
Can't hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you have any questions?
Okay. Switch Wi-Fi. 1 second.
So have you found more family than you thought you were going to find when you started researching your book?
Yeah. So, well, the fun story about that is that I moved here to get away from my family to the Twin Cities. And when I was doing the research, besides the Chicago connection, I found out that my great grandmother and her children immigrated to just across the border here from where I'm living. And so when I first moved here to come to graduate school, I came here because it felt like home to me. And I thought, this is cool, but I don't know anybody from here. And this is really original on my part. And aren't I so independent? And so I'm related to a ton of people in Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Chicago. In fact, sometimes I think I'm related to all of Western Wisconsin because that was a huge family and they kept having kids. And so, yes, I have found more people. I've been to family reunions of 300, 400 people in the small town of less than 1,000. So they make up half the town. And so it has been, that was the thing that actually scared my barista at Starbucks when I was telling her the story, when I was putting together the book. She said, wait a minute, you're not from here? I said, no. Can't you listen to me talk? I'm not from here. I'm from Western Pennsylvania. And she was shocked that I moved here. She said, because why? I said, it felt like home. So that's another thing. So less the supernatural stuff than the fact that I have evidential things that say, yes, I moved here, and yes, they are across the way, and they're all buried in there, and there's so many of the other ones. And I was drawn to certain things. There was a book that I read when I was a little kid that was about this little pioneer girl, and I thought, what a great, this place called Wisconsin. I was just enamored with it. She too is part, just not too far. She was buried not too far from here. So it's just certain things I was drawn to. And I don't know if you all have had that experience, but there are certain things that you're drawn to. You don't have a place for them, but eventually something comes up and it's like, that's why. Mm-hmm. So yes, I'm related to everybody, apparently, Victoria. So yes, it's just.
The same thing happened to me the other day. And I was grumbling about something. I'm like, I can't do this. I can only do this in this certain town. And I threw my phone down because I was pissed off. And I'm not kidding. Less than a minute later, my phone rang and it had the name of that city. I'm like, oh my God. That's
weird, isn't it? I love when that happens. I think it happens once you start paying attention. What I hope for people, if they do read this book, and it's like, you don't have to, because I did make it deliberately difficult because my audience, I found, is very smart. I mean, in terms of people, they need to be challenged. And it's like, okay, follow this line, follow that line. But I also think I want people to be inspired to do their own searching in their own family lines and to see what kind of crazy stuff you find and then write to me because I want to hear about it. Because I think that's the nice thing about the fellowship of this. It's just that you're not alone. And like my friend who wrote those books on the supernatural experiences, he's in his 80s now and he says, yeah, there are thousands of us. And we're now talking about it. So I think it just it brings it up from the depths and also discourages some of the stuff that you were talking about, Damien, with the sort of, I don't know, entertainment, sort of cheesy, superficial stuff, because this stuff needs to be taken seriously. I mean, I take it seriously and it does scare me still. It's like, okay, I do want to make sure that I'm always aware of what's going on and not just anybody's going to be coming in here physically or otherwise. But so far, other than being a disconcerting experience at first because I didn't expect it, I got used to it really quickly. And I've been able to introduce others to it as well. And they get scared. So, but then they get over it. I said, it's okay. They're not going to hurt you. Don't worry about it. They're fine. They're family.
Be scared.
Nothing to be fear of here. So yeah, so that's how that happens. So yes.
So when you speak to these spirits, do they speak back to you?
Yeah, they do, but not in the sense of I know when you go to a therapist or whatever, you're not supposed to say you hear command voices. So I never have heard voices. I don't think I have, but it'll be something, that's still small voices you hear about. There'll be like a thought of, like you were talking about, this a town or something will show up. And what the thing with it is, the more you give it attention to that intuition and follow it, and you do make mistakes. It's not like everything just turns out so hunky dory. It's just like, whoa. But you start to trust that you can get out of whatever jam you're in and you can find your way. It's like the ship that needs to be righted again and needs to have the ballast, basically maneuvered a little bit. But I do think that when I say I can talk to the dead, they talk through records and newspapers. They talk through the new stuff that's being found in DNA, all this other stuff. It's like a combination of science, but also art. And then the art of listening, those little thoughts. It's like, call this person or look this up. There was one situation where I'll have a feeling about somebody that I think I might be related to, which is my family. It's not that much of a stretch, but one of the flag raisers at Iwo Jima, this is my father's side, Michael Strank, I thought, I think I'm related to this guy. Sure enough, I found some DNA matches on that side. So things like that have happened that really have nothing directly to do with this. But because of this, because of what I went through, I'm much more open and I'm much quicker to just say, let's take a look at this and just see. And also, too, learning how to read the blood, not just follow the blood, but learning how to read each one of those strands of DNA. You and I match on this, and, we're cousins of this, whatever. And I think that also empowers people when they can do that and just realize, you are not alone. Whether you like it or not, you are with a lot of other people, living and dead. So it's very powerful.
Do you have any connection or family connection to the Titanic by any chance?
As far as I know, we don't, because I think I don't think so. I wouldn't be surprised, but I think honestly, given the demographics of that crew, I think most probably were fairly wealthy, if not necessarily famous. But I don't think that's generally not my crew. But ironically, I am one of the other bizarre things. My mother always had an affinity for the Romanov family, the last Tsar of Russia, Lucky Nick, as we call him. Oh. And and so years later, when we did the DNA tests, like 2017 or whatever, they have famous people you're related to, and guess who? Nicholas Romanov. So I called my mother. I said, "Hey, guess what?" And she said, "You're kidding," because she was always fascinated with Anastasia, who was the daughter who. This woman who claimed to be her daughter. So I said, "There's so many of these crisscrosses. We could make a crazy quilt out of these things." And I'm not the only one, to have these kind of experiences. But the only difference is I pay attention to them and I go with my suspicion or gut level check until the science proves me out. So crazy stuff. This is why I still do it.
How long did it take you to do the initial bloodlines?
The bloodlines or the research for the book?
Well, no, not the book, but
the bloodlines. Well, probably I started. So I think we did our DNA test in 2017. It didn't take long, only because I have a fairly decent background in science, and once I learned how to, it's another way of reading the cards, I suppose. Learning how to read the connections, seeing how they overlap, all this, the stuff that does put people to sleep when you start talking about it, and then working with people who are doing forensic types of stuff, which I've done a little bit of this type of thing. So it didn't take long at all. And I'm still learning, though, because it's still, even though it's in a sense more established than it was in the 90s, it's still a new science. So discoveries are always being made. So connections for sure. But the whole thing about ethnicity, what are you, that's getting more fine-tuned, more accurate. But I was able to use that blood connection to find out the actual blood ancestors of all the lines of the family. Even if there were no records, I could find connections, could trace them back to faraway places and see, how it all comes together. And it just makes my brain hurt sometimes when I think about it, but it really is it's quite phenomenal. And I get bored really easily, and I kind of have a bit of attention deficit stuff, but not with this stuff. It's just like, I could stay up all night looking at something and like, wow. It's crazy. And I've helped a lot of people to find their birth families, mostly birth fathers. So that's been a nice thing too, to help people out.
What's the learning curve on doing this?
Depends if you like science, I suppose. Not very. I was able to figure it out. We had one 80-year-old family mystery that my cousin's wife wanted me to figure out for him because we never knew who his birth father was. His mom was my dad's older sister. And we figured it out probably in a matter of 3 or 4 months. But we had to do a lot of back and forth because I didn't want to. Here's the thing with genealogy. You can start to disrupt living people's lives too. And that I did not want to do. I'm still, again, very cautious. And I had to make doubly, triply sure. And we did find out who the person, well, he's long gone, but we did find out the family. And fortunately for us, most of the members of that family welcomed him. And they were so glad to meet him. And he had some sense of closure. And he's in his 80s now. So it took me probably, once I did that first initial 4 or 5 months, it was easier. And sometimes it still is difficult. Sometimes I cannot figure it out. So I think having a healthy sense of, you still have more to learn here. Okay. But I think initially you can figure out certainly close cousins, close relationships. It's fairly easy. And sometimes you see things and you realize that people might not want to be hearing these things. And you kind of more it's the ethical thing of backing away. So the dead are a little bit easier to deal with for me. So the living ones are can be kind of problematic. Like, what do you do? So I always try to be careful. I always try to be respectful. But the truth, some people don't want it. So just like back away.
You use the term memento mori, and
yes.
what that means is, remember that you're a future dead person, and consider what you would want to leave behind for those who want to know you in 100 years.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Besides cat videos, yes, which would be my thing. But I think it's easier now. It's easier now because we can take all these photos. We have so much that they never had back in the day, 100 years ago. But it's almost like what message would I want to give? I wanted to give a message through this book, through those that come after me. And yeah, they can look at my cat videos, but it's like, what is the message that I want to share with these people? What do I want to leave behind? What do I wish my Aunt Martha, who died on the Eastland, could have told me? That type of thing. So all these types of things. And I think it could be kind of fun, but remembering that I'm a future dead person. You all are future dead people. It's not depressing, but it's one of those things where, hey, get moving. We're not in the 10 items or less checkout line yet, but we could be. And as we've seen, things can happen. It was also fragile. So I think keeping that in front of you should be, for me, it's a motivator. Sometimes it's like, I got too much to worry about today, maybe tomorrow. But if it's always a part of your intentions or being, I think I choose things differently now than I did, 25 years ago. It's like, this looks like fun. But it's like, wait a minute, what is this feeding into? What do I want to leave? And having just lost both parents now, it's one of those things where I really think, hey, next, what do I want to, what do I want them to remember?
Wild, are you with us?
Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Now, yeah.
Do you have any questions, man?
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff. Sorry about earlier. Earlier I could hear and see everything you guys were saying. Then I just had to do a reset of everything. Catastrophic failure happened. I don't know. But thank you, Natalie, for being here. It's really nice to meet you. You're very entertaining. You're a very good speaker. And I'm looking forward to reading more of your writing. I know you're a prolific writer, so I can't wait to read some of your stuff.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're very welcome. I have some questions and also some points I wanted to make. Okay, one point, I guess I'll compliment you, Natalie, because I want to compliment you on the way you handled the paranormal, which was very calmly, and you were kind of treating it like a person, basically, like you would treat another individual with respect. Because I think I've come to believe that an error a lot of people make, and I'm not blaming them, but when they experience something paranormal, they act irrationally, and they get scared, and that makes things worse, and it can prolong suffering from both ends, probably. I think the paranormal thing perhaps is also getting, not happy by your reaction. But based on your story, when these things started happening, you were just clear-headed about it. You had some prior knowledge of what might be happening, and you approached it with respect as you would a colleague. I feel like you were treating it like a colleague or someone, and you had a conflict or you wanted to come to an understanding. So I did like that a lot. And I think that's good advice. I think other people should do the same thing if they're encountering a paranormal episode, we could call it. The The other point was that I was thinking about mass tragedies and the paranormal, and what do they have in common? I think one thing they have in common is that they stretch the human psychology. They stretch our minds and emotions in ways that we're not used to. Now, a tragedy, it really pushes us to the limits of grief, sadness, and despair. It's outside of our normal bonds of those emotions. And if you see something like paranormal, it could be something like you're filled with awe or wonder, or it's pushing your understanding of the universe in a different way. So it probably means nothing. I'm just saying, I think mass tragedies and paranormal do have something in common emotionally in the way they affect human minds and how they stretch our understanding of things. And then my questions were, thank you. And my questions were, do you feel, one of my questions was, do you feel, I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you. Having gone through this experience, all this paranormal stuff, do you feel like your life is better for it? And then another question, and I'll let you answer, is my second question is, going through your experience, do you feel that an essential part of the human experience should be honoring our elders, past generations, and learning about them? Because I know that in some cultures that is emphasized, but in some, like modern American culture, it's not emphasized at all. Nothing. Nobody cares about the dead, really. I mean, hardly ever. So I'll repeat my questions. Do you feel better after having these experiences? Number two, after having these experiences, do you think it is part of this essential part of human life to honor our dead ancestors?
Whoa, I just like how you said it, Trees. I do think, I mean, I was a miserable person for a while when it was happening. I don't want to bypass, because I'm telling the story that happened, it happened a long time ago. At first it was upsetting, it was disconcerting, and it did throw me off my game because I was already thrown off because of my dad's death. And I thought, what next, So it did. But eventually, as I didn't try to bypass the pain. I thought, I've got to go through this. And the other point that you made about honoring our dead, I think because I straddle the worlds of I grew up with two of my grandparents from what is now Slovakia and from Poland. They had a reverence for the dead. And so I straddled those worlds, speaking those languages, learning how they coped with that. We honored them. We light the candles. We do whatever. We go to the cemeteries. So I'm from Johnstown, Pennsylvania. And if you don't know, Johnstown had a nice big flood in 1889 where 2,500 people were killed. One of my relatives was in that as well. I know that's why people don't want to go with me on cruises or anything. But that was another thing too. So I was a little girl and we'd go to the cemeteries and see everybody and honor them and say their names. And so I was primed for this stuff, Trees. So it's like one of those things where we did, but other people didn't. And I still feel bad about that because it's like, there's your link. People are running to try to find meaning, whatever. It's like, go to the nearest cemetery where your people are, start talking. They might not be there, but they'll answer eventually. They'll give you an email, whatever they do. But I think that I was lucky to be born to who I was born to, though at the time I thought, oh boy, they were like the Munsters or the Addams Family. I didn't really appreciate it at that point, but I do now. And I think that I try to impart that to the generations that come out who who didn't learn the languages, who didn't learn the customs. So I try to share those things. It's like, this is important.
Angel Wings is in the room with us.
Angel Wings. Boy, we got some interesting people here. Hello, Angel Wings.
And it says at Black Lotus Productions, hey, let her know that ironically, I'm from northwestern Wisconsin.
Oh, are we related then? Is that it? Winter, Wisconsin, Ojibwe, Wisconsin. Yeah, that's where I have people. So, wow. I'll look you up if you're on the DNA list. We'll see if I can find you. I'm not kidding.
Well, I think we're going to get out of here for the night. Natalie, it's been wonderful talking with you. Very
Thank
interesting.
Thank you so much.
I think I really learned some things here. So, especially about, the Eastland disaster. I I didn't know anything about that until recently. So,
well, thank you so much. And right back at you all. You guys are just, I feel like I've known you for a long time, and your questions and your eyes and everything else is just wonderful. And I didn't know about your podcast, and I try not to go too deep because I thought I just want to be, have the element of surprise, but you all are wonderful and you're doing wonderful work. And I loved your questions and your consideration. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
It
you.
was
You're
nice
welcome.
chatting with you.
Nice to chat with you.
Viewers, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe buttons. When you hit the subscribe, make sure you hit the bell for all so you get notified every time we do this. We do this every Sunday and Thursday at 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 Pacific. And also, if you have friends who are into the topics that we talk about, make sure to share this around with them. We would really appreciate it. So until next time, keep thinking and question everything.
Thank you.